Um, hello and welcome to the input and discussion about the storytelling website. Oh, just I hear me in the background, sorry. So, no, I'm fine. Okay, about the storytelling website, story.wobblies.org, which is about 3 campaigns of the IWW. And in this website, we show you like the behind of the scenes of this grassroots organizing. And I'm Aljoscha. I'm a social worker in Bremen. I'm in the organizing department of the IWW in the German language area, which is for Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And here I have Mark, but also I just remember I forgot to ask you how I should introduce you. So I just give it to you, and perhaps you could say something about you.
Sure. My name is Mark Medina. I'm a worker organizer with the Burgerville Workers Union, the IWW. I'm previously with SCIU, and as an organizer before that as a shop steward for Unite Here.
Okay, thank you. Below the video, you could see a link to in pad, and if you're interested to write down some of your interests, some questions, or also perhaps some things you wanted to discuss with us, then please write it in there. And on the right side, you also find like a small chat where you could discuss with each other, and we try to insert your questions or your input for our discussions. So the website we started as the organizing department was kind of an effort to make it more, I don't know, relatable in some sense, to say what does organizing mean, and especially what does organizing mean for grassroots unions. Mm-hmm. And I was able in 2016 to do my master's thesis about these 3 campaigns. And today we will talk about the Burgerville Workers Union in the fast food sector. And just we will also just show you a bit of like the Jimmy John's Workers Union, which is also like a sandwich chain in the US. And the third one is Starbucks, which I guess you all know, a coffee house chain. And I think I was curious about how some kind of campaign from this IWW campaigns work when 2012, 2 fellow workers from Minneapolis came to Germany and Austria, which was Eric and Micah, and they did a talk about this organizing stuff at Jimmy John's. So, and if you ask yourself the question, why should we bother about the United States? Why is that important, or why is it interesting for us? I would say that...
Great question.
Definitely. I would say that the 3 countries in the world who are like very experienced and one of the world leaders in social engineering or social domination techniques are the US, China, and also Germany. And since still the US is like the hegemonic world power, don't know if that will last the next couple of 20 years or so, but still at this moment, a lot of managerial techniques who are also like taught in the universities are also like used in some big companies like Amazon or Google and so on, like with about, I don't know, 3 to 4 or perhaps 5 years of delay, they come to the German language area and also to other parts of the world. So that means a lot of techniques that are kind of like tested in the US come also to the German language area and of course to other areas. Meaning that a lot of, well, the fellow workers in the US some kind of have to deal with them first, and then they all the bosses try to use them in like in different ways, of course in like different contexts, but still the bosses are like kind of a vanguard of the capitalist class, like in the US. So in that way, that makes it interesting for us. And that's not just a thing for the IWW, but I know that also like from other unions, for example, the IG Metall in Germany, who are like the biggest union at Volkswagen. And I think one of the biggest organizing campaigns they have is in the US right now. So which is in kind of like a support of automobile workers, but still they know they also have to do organizing there because you can't hold the like high standards if the companies say, well, we just move our factories and so on. Okay. And I could say this research also like inspired me to organize with some fellow workers in Bremen, also in the social sector. So I'm also kind of like interested for myself in that sense. The website has like 3 chapters. The first is the preconditions. So what do you have to take a look like beforehand if you start something? Then we have this example of the campaigns, and in that chapter, more Mark will talk about that because he knows a bit more about Burgerville. And the last time we spoke was October 2016. So I just some kind of I followed everything on social media, or at least some things. But of course, you are more the expert than that. And the third chapter would be help for your own organizing projects if you're planning to do one. And yeah, so that is the concept for today. Good. So Mark, then I will start in the first chapter then, and I would share my desktop with you. And then, yeah, if you feel you want to jump in or so on, just do it, and then yeah, or I will ask you some questions.
Sure. I think we can start off with asking some questions, and if you want me to start with an introduction of the campaign and then jump into the questions.
Yeah, right. But we will do that if we come to chapter 2.
Gotcha.
Okay. So here is my desktop, and I will show you around a bit here. And at first, I wanted to show you a video, which is from April 2018, and it is from Telesur, and I think you just won the recognition at Burgerville at that point. Okay, so just a minute, I have to get the link. And we spoke beforehand, and Mark said he couldn't see the video, so it means like about 40 seconds you're muted, and then we will jump in again.
Let's remember that this is not a personal thing between our workers and the managers here, who we have very good relations. Who we have good relations with and want to continue that. This is an issue between workers and corporate.
Okay, so and we also saw Mark in the video with the megaphone, which he apparently couldn't see. Okay, so we start in with this. So I have to my desktop again. Sorry. So the thing is, if you start a campaign, I think it's always interesting or good to know a bit of the context where you work. And this knowledge about like these conditions is also interesting because if we talk about unions today, there's also like a kind of an echo from the past. So if we, for example, if I talk with my coworkers or with other leftists about what is a strike, then a lot of people like come up with these ideas or these pictures of, well, these are these white men at the automobile industries, and these are these 10,000 strong men who always I don't know, like march through the streets, and and were like very strong in the past, and today nobody is organizing. So that's kind of like the picture that emerges from that, at least in my experience. And so if we talk about unions today, I think we kind of like have to deal with this kind of echo, and also we have to answer the question of like, how do we do it today? And I think Burgerville, as Mark will tell you, is a bit of an example of how do you do that in a very, very large industry, but also with very few organizing approaches, or very, very few workers are organized. What my personal thing is always like to talk about this: how do the bosses act to do us like to control us, or also to split us in the workplace? And this kind of like control techniques, they are, as I said, like in the US, like a lot of stuff comes up there. Of course, that is like, it's not just the bad imperial power in the US where that happens, but I just said like a lot of things is like used there and then come to other areas. And like, for example, at my job, one of the biggest things is the so-called quality management, which means we have like checklists for every stuff. So if I talk to like a client, or if I write down what I did today, I have always like a list where people said, okay, you have 3 minutes and 40 seconds for this task, and you have this for that task. And I am pretty sure, as Mark will say later, that this kind of technique is also used at Burgerville, of course, like in a different context, but still it is a technique which has also been used like in the automobile industry in the 1920s, where that what kind of a thing was like invented. So if you want to jump in like later, then you can do a lot of like research here. And why is it not working? Hello. Okay. You can jump in here, and you can jump in like a bit more deeper, which I will not tell you all the things here, because like this kind of like capitalist rule, or this kind of domination techniques also like changed over time. And some leftists like really took a deep dive into that and said like, how does it work today? And especially how does it work like with this technological attack, how they called it, especially since the emergence of the iPhone and like all this so-called digitalization, which like really disrupted or like really changed our day-to-day lives. You can blah 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 and so on and so forth, and like, and how does the left react to it? And this video I will not show you today, but I think Starbucks is also for this food and retail sector one of the pioneers in that sense, because Starbucks also like invests a lot of money in technological stuff. So in this documentation on PBS, I think it's from 2014, they tell a bit about the part-time staff in the shops. So they have like 100% part-time staff in the shops as baristas. And if you want to be, if you want to work 30 hours a week, you have to be like available for 70 hours a week. And what they really like big strong thing for them was this inventing of the so-called of a like shift planning software. And they claim to be able of think about like, they claim that they can plan how many customers will come into your shop. So because like you have an app for Starbucks and can say, I wanna order a coffee and I want to pick up it at the next shop in, I don't know, 3 streets away, and then they call some workers and say, please come in, we need you. And then it could be happening that 5 minutes before that they say, oh, sorry, we don't need you, we can go home again. And that's kind of like big stuff. in this documentation, they tell that about Manhattan, because like also the Starbucks, there are a lot of Starbucks shops around there, but I'm pretty sure that is also used in different areas. So that is one thing. And then I'm not sure if that is, I guess that is more a thing in the US and also in Great Britain. What we wrote down here about like this so-called generation conflict, because I feel that, or I could say that also in the German unions, that like it is a lot of people who are like overage, which is not a problem in general, but it just say there's some kind of like a generation split of, or like a tendency just as a generation split, also like who has what kind of working conditions, who is like more part-time, and also who has not got a lot of property and not like a bright future ahead, which some generations before us had. And that also has an impact of like how many people or what kind of people like get active. And I feel that also a lot of discussions, especially in the German language area, about this so-called new class politics, which is in a sense a discussion to say, what does class war mean? Like what kind of people should be organized and what not? And there's often this kind of, some kind of contradictions, or at least some people say there are contradictions, to say, well, there's this white old man versus this young women in the metropolitan areas and so on and so forth, which I'm pretty sure is some kind of a discussion in the US as well, especially in this context of like Bernie Sanders campaign and also like Jeremy Corbyn in the UK. And like one fun fact at that point is that I read a couple of years ago in an article where it said like 60% of trade union members in the UK are now women, which also like points out to stuff like in the mainstream unions, which also points like to in fact that like the class is changing, or the class composition is changing, and in some way we have to deal with it, and it doesn't. We don't have to always like talk about like this echo of the past, which is at least my position. Okay, so my desktop again. Okay, so if we jump into a campaign, I had the feeling that in some ways nothing is as it seems from the outside, because perhaps it also has to do something with the echo of the past, to say a lot of campaigns that are here on the website, and I think that's also the case, or at least from what I know, it is also the case for the Burgerville campaign, so that it started with about like 4 to 5 people, like some leftists who said, well, okay, let's do a campaign, and then we build up on that. And I can't really say if that was the case like 100 years ago, but I'm pretty sure that some kinds of, not in the sense like a vanguard, but in the sense of there were small active groups who said, well, we want to do something, and then in some cases a lot of other people join, and in some cases they don't. And so what I think we also do in the IWW, to say like we practice together like how to go forward. We also need some kind of like environment to say we share our experiences, and we also see like 70% of the time I think we lose, and then about like 30% of the cases like we win, and that is kind of a normal thing. So we don't have to put that on our shoulders, even if, I don't know, if we try really hard, then there's always the possibility to fail, which doesn't mean we have to stop. It just means that we really have to talk about like also how we should react in the future. Mm-hmm. And what I also wanted to, or also from what I recognized about these 3 campaigns, that all started with like organizers who specifically thought about like how do we want to work. So they went into these shops or into these chains, and I know that from the German language area that this discussion is always about, well, yeah, some guys in the 70s did that, but it did all fail, and so we can't do that anymore. And I don't know. I think or that's at least like one point where I was so interested when Micah and Eric came 2012 to said, well, I don't know. We came from the university, and then we had so much debt, and then we said, I don't know, if we don't have like such a bright future ahead, then we could do that like as a political project, and then we will see if it works or if it doesn't. And at least like we could try it. Yeah. So, and then I interviewed 17 people in 4 cities, I think. And we did like a group discussion. Mark was also part of the discussion in Portland in the office of the IWW. And yeah, I think I already said that, like this headlines like previous experiences, yeah, and then the selected companies and the organizing model. And from my knowledge, I would say like on the website you can see it like from the newest campaign to the oldest, but in a sense it all, or a lot of stuff like builds up on the experiences of the Starbucks Workers Union, which also made, I think, the IWW in some kind of I don't know, famous again in some sense, because there was 2008 this global day against repression on Starbucks, I think, which was one from the IWA, this narco-syndicalist international, and they did this big action, and I think that was had some kind of like impact on very different countries, like in South America and also in Europe and so on. And so that kind of like inspired a new generation of organizers, at least like from what I know. So on the last thing here is from here to revolution, because the IWW not only says like we're doing the trade union organizing under capitalist conditions, but always, or at least from what we think of ourselves, we talk about like how do we do a revolution and what does that mean for our organizing today. Okay, so that is like the preconditions. And then I wanted to show you the video of the first public action, which was April 29, 2016. And you will see, oh no, you can see for yourself. And then Mark just has to wait because he can't see the video like for about 5 minutes, but I will tell you when you will be on again.
I'm sure it's
The
wonderful.
industrial workers in the world have a long history of organizing fast food workers, from Jimmy John's in the Twin Cities to Starbucks in New York. We've drawn inspiration from the Fight for 15 nationwide. Take it a step farther, a leap farther, and organize a union with fast food workers.
I want to make it clear to you that you're already a union. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The moment you decided to act collectively to solve your problems, you are a union.
We understand that we are living within a system where people cannot get their basic needs met, where they can work 40 hours a week and not afford housing or food or medical care, and that is unacceptable.
Right. And I'd be lying if I didn't say I was a little scared. But I know we can win. Because I'm not standing up here alone. I'm standing here with my coworkers.
At this very moment, workers in the Pacific Northwest are presenting their demands to corporate. They're coming out to their bosses, revealing their union, and beginning their fight to build a voice and build worker power from within the company.
Hi.
I'm Jordan.
Hi, Tisa.
Tisa?
I'm
Nice to
Ellie.
meet you.
Hi.
I'm
Abby.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Ellie. Hi.
Jack Moss.
Nice to meet you. Hi.
So we work at Burgerville 38, and we're here representing the Burgerville Workers Union. I've been working for Burgerville for 6 months now. I used to work in a different industry where I was paid a living wage, but I got hurt on the job, and I was no longer able to physically do the work. So my only option now is food service. But like people often don't realize how physically demanding and fast-paced our job is. And every day is a struggle for me physically, honestly, like with my injury. And I work 40 plus hours a week, often over 9-hour days. And by the end of the day, my body hurts. By the end of the week, sometimes the pain's like unbearable. But at $9.47 an hour, like I have to work 40 plus hours a week, or like I cannot pay my bills. And honestly, like it's unacceptable to me that Burgerville is making a profit off of the work that I'm doing while I'm struggling to get by physically and financially.
We're here supporting these workers today because we think that people need to be valued in their jobs, need to be making a living wage, need to have control over their schedules. These are people within our community, within your community. And we think that we can turn out people with these workers the whole time to support them because this is a community issue at a local organization, local company that we all love to support. And we want Oregon and the Pacific Northwest to be a leader in workers' rights.
We also stand up for workers for dignity and just compensation for the hard, dedicated work they do. We believe that's a fundamental right of all workers to be able to provide for themselves.
I just have one thing to say. I think that workers give their lives, really, that part of their lives which they have for their support and everything, to the company. And in return, that they should be given as much as they can be given, and certainly it shouldn't be less than what covers their needs.
Union power! Who's got the power? We got the power! What kind of power? Union power! Who's got the power? We got the power! What kind of power? Union power! Who's got the power? We got the power! What kind of power? Union power! Who's got the power? We got the power! What kind of power? Union power! Burgerville workers on the rise! Burgerville workers on the rise! Now's the time to organize! Now's the time to organize! Burgerville workers on the rise! Burgerville workers on the rise!
We are about to go into our workplace and bring a letter letting our general manager know and letting corporate know that we have formed the Burgerville Workers Union. We matter. Yeah. We work hard. We want a raise.
Yeah!
And we deserve one.
Yeah!
This is a letter that explains our vision.
Okay.
We expect you guys not to retaliate against us, and know that we have the right under federal labor law to organize and come together as workers, and we look forward to negotiating with you.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
I'm here today because such a wealthy business to pay their workers poverty wages is unacceptable. So I stand in solidarity, unwavering, with people who deserve a living wage.
Your change, that you put it in the tip jar, because they don't pay their workers enough. So right now, we have this tip jar here as a way to take care of them in a way that they don't. So please put all this money in the tip jar.
All right, put the tip jar between the records.
Can't survive on $9.25! Can't survive on $9.25! Can't survive on $9.25!
We talked to our general manager, and we talked to several people from corporate headquarters in Vancouver, and we let them know that we formed the Burgerville Workers Union because we matter, we work hard, we want respect, and we need a raise.
Okay, so we're back on again. Okay, so I'm not sure if that works. I think if you talk, then they can't see my desktop. So then we just jump in. Yeah, please tell us a bit about like what is Burgerville?
Sure. Burgerville is a regional fast food company in the Pacific Northwest. It employs about 1,300 workers and about 200 additional managerial staff and corporate staff. They have a revenue of about, this may be significantly outdated, but 72 million annually. That's in revenue, not necessarily profits. They are tied with Chipotle as the most profitable fast casual fast food company in Oregon, and they market themselves particularly as progressive and sustainable. They care about the environment. They care about their the affiliate organizations that produce their food, and they lean heavily on that. And for all intents and purposes, all of it is smoke and mirrors. Surprise, surprise. And yeah, I know, shocking. Yeah, and yeah, that would be the company.
Okay. So then let us a bit know about the background of your organizing project.
Sure.
Which is so inspiring for a lot of people in the IWW, and I guess from also like people from the outside.
I hope so. Hope someone's, hope someone's paying attention. Yeah. Well, let me start off. I mean, a little bit about myself. My name is Mark Medina. I'm an organizer with the Burgerville Workers Union. And in, I think it was March, somewhere between March 10th and March 15th of 2015, me and another fellow worker from the IWW met and talked. I had just come back from a conference with SEIU in St. Louis, and I felt a little, I wouldn't say demoralized, but different of opinion on regarding the Fight for 15. Different unions organize differently. And at the time,
tell us a bit about like what is this Fight for 15, which I know. Sure. I'm not sure if everybody knows about it.
Oh, got you. That's right. Fight for 15 was a campaign by the SEIU. I think started, I get the year wrong, but maybe it was 2012. And it was a campaign around raising wages to $50 an hour. At the time in the United States, today the federal minimum wage I think is $7.75, and different states have it at different levels. I think Oregon at the time was the state in America where I'm from. I think it was around $9.25 or something, $9.25. And so the campaign was to increase wages. The SEIU is a larger, more mainstream union, or probably the most mainstream union in the United States. And they aimed to get local, state, and congressional officials to push to increase the minimum wage through laws passed, that not necessarily the IW way of doing things. And I thought, well, I applaud any worker getting a wage increase. I think that's a good thing. It doesn't do anything to give those workers the tools and the power to be able to change the circumstances of their own employment and to change their communities. And why wait for elected officials anywhere to do the right thing, or to put their thumb up to the wind and see where it's blowing, and maybe it's blowing in the way of workers, to do it ourselves. And so when I came back from that conference in St. Louis with the SEIU, I met up with another organizer at SEIU who talked to me about a worker in the IWW in Portland who'd be very interested in a lot of the critiques that we were having in a drunken conversation at the hotel. And went back to Portland, met up with him, and then with 2 pens of paper and 2 cups of coffee, we started planning the Burgerville Workers Union. Within a couple months, we had a couple more organizers. The original was five organizers. So we all salted. Salting is a process by which workers get a job intentionally at a workplace with the intention of organizing it. So 5 of us got jobs at Burgerville. We chose Burgerville specifically because it was in my talks that I had with you earlier. We chose Burgerville specifically because it was an employer that was small enough that we could actually have a capacity of winning things, and large enough to matter and to have an effect. And I think what we have come to want to show the rest of the labor movement and also workers is that this is how you can run a low-cost, member-driven model of organizing, and which is, I hope, is what we're able to demonstrate to the rest of the labor movement. Things that other people can replicate. That doesn't cost an enormous amount. Doesn't take an enormous amount of support from a larger bureaucracy. So, like in larger mainstream unions. So yeah, and that's how we started. What was the other question there?
No, I think that was it. Like the first one was what is Burgerville? The other one was like background on your organizing project.
Yeah.
And what I did in 2016 was to do a group interview, and I think we have 5 or 7 people. Like we started with 7 people, and I tried to get a bit like a round of like what is your model, And I will not jump into every category here, but this canvas model in general was developed from fellow workers in New York. And they said that in every campaigns, you get like a lot of questions, like what are the problems? How do we build our power? Like, how do we secure wins if we have some? And like, how do we deal like with communication amongst each other and so on? And they felt that they could use, I think it was, I forgot the name again. Like the original one, the original canvas is like from a strategic company in Switzerland, and they say that a lot of like people of the Fortune 500 companies use it like to plan some kinds of campaigns or like products. And these fellow workers in New York, they had the feeling like we could like switch that into like a union campaign model. In some sense, I wasn't sure if that is the right move or if it works and so on. But I think if you understand it as I don't know, like a questionnaire for things that come up in every campaign, then I think it can work. And it doesn't mean like you fill it out once and then it's finished, but at least like to do it like in work in progress. And like in the sense of like this work in progress, we had the status as of October 2016. Yeah, and we talked a bit like a lot of like what were your day-to-day problems, and perhaps you jump in a bit about that. And I also remember that we especially talked about like this social domination techniques, like which I mentioned also before to say, I think there was one example that you told me about, like making an ice cream and like do this whipped cream on top of it. And like, I think you got things from the boss. They said, no, you can't do that because it's not standardized and so on. Perhaps you can jump in a bit more what's going on in day-to-day life at Burgerville.
Sure. Yeah, I think the example that you were talking about was that was a fellow worker, Denny, who brought that up at the time, and it was that he was working the shake machine, and it's just as an example of the kinds of things that you would see in a corporatized structure, and that atomize the worker from the work they do. It's that they were trying to put some flair and something into their work and trying to make it more interesting, and so making shakes in a way that was like adequate and looked good, and wanted to add their own spin on it. Perfectly. I mean, any average person would look at that as a perfectly fine thing as a worker trying to put a little bit of themselves in their work and taking pride in their work, and was thoroughly scolded by management several times over doing that. And many workers say the same thing, that your individuality isn't quite important. In those times, actually, having unnaturally colored hair, or unnaturally or hair that wasn't seen as more professional, like for example afros, were not appropriate there. Having facial hair wasn't appropriate. So that was things that existed back then. This is prior to the union going public, especially. And over time, we've been able to change that. We've been able to push them on these issues with both a like in-shop direct actions, as well as a at this point, very well-tuned media strategy, whereby we can put pressure publicly on the company on different issues that they do. So we've been able to make sure that a lot of, not just our members, we represent about 170 Burgerville workers officially through collective bargaining, but we also de facto represent all 1,300 in a lot of issues, because the company refuses to do separate things just for union shops and only negotiates now for all workers. So in effect, we have the effect of representing all 1,300.
Wow.
So yeah. So these issues that we've been able to push over the last couple of years didn't come through necessarily bargaining. It did come through recognition. I mean, I don't think these gains happened. There's a reason why these gains didn't happen until we won recognition, but they didn't come through bargaining. They came through, we were able to have an even larger attention of the public on our campaign and what we were doing, and a lot more pressure, therefore, on the company's brand. And so the company responded in kind by changing a lot of their more more than usual dumb policies.
Do you mind explaining a bit about this recognition process? I think this is kind of like a unique thing. I don't know. I'm sure. I think there's some similar stuff in the UK too, but I think for Germany that's not the case. Could you say what is this recognition process?
Yeah, I think so. In a lot of countries around the world, y'all have something akin to social sectoral bargaining, and we don't have that. So we have so in the United States, the way it works is that if workers at a certain place, a certain company want a union, they have to get signatures through union cards that say that they consent to them being represented by a union in collective bargaining. You have to get a majority of workers, you have to get over 30% of workers to sign those cards and then turn them in order to trigger what's called a union election. Or the company can always voluntarily recognize the union through this process, but nearly never does. So if you get over 30% of cards signed, that triggers the process of union election. Then there's under more friendly administrations, like during the Obama administration, use that very loosely. During the Obama administration, that process is shortened to about 3 or 4 weeks. Under more conservative administrations, that process can be extended up to 6 months from between when you petition for the election to when you actually get to vote. And of course, throughout that process, the employer will illegally fire workers, do all sorts of enforcement intimidation, force anti-union meetings, promise things to anti-union workers. I think it was in 2008, a study by the AFL-CIO gave that in union campaigns throughout the United States, there were over 14,000 cases of employer intimidation of workers, 41 cases of union intimidation of workers. So you see an enormous time, and this is union elections are a time in which you see an extra amount of pressure on workers to fall in line with the will of the employer. So after you get that election triggered, if you get 50% plus one of people in your workplace to support the union during that process, then the union is the company is forced to recognize the union and is compelled to enter into negotiations in what's called good faith.
Mm-hmm. What I remember is that there's a lot of discussion in the IWW if that is like an adequate strategy or not. Could you tell us why did you use that strategy?
Sure. And I think that's right. I think there's a lot of views in the IW regarding this, and I think that it's important to not be doctrinaire about these things, and I try to remind myself that when you mix ideology and tactics, you get dogma, and to not fall in that direction, and to think about things from different vantage points, and that not every case is the same. I think it's important. There's enormous problems potentially with recognition and with contract bargaining versus minority unionism, solidarity unionism. And so there's enormous pitfalls that you see in some larger unions. You get bureaucracy, you get an ossification of the union, you have the same 10, 20, 30 activist members of the union involved in this ossified organization. You lose the militancy that gets you those wins in the contract fight. Those are all legitimate, and I think that's accurate to say that happens in certain situations. I think that the other thing I appreciate about the IW and the history of the IW is the belief of autonomy and self-determination. A thing that in Black and Brown community exists in our histories, the notions of autonomy and self-determination, to decide for ourselves and decide for our members in a member-led movement, for them to decide what is the way forward. And I think that's what we did. Is we surveyed our members quite often about what they thought about all these issues and what they thought about their campaign. And we pride ourselves in thinking that, and we make all the efforts that we can to put workers at the forefront of their own movement and make them be the decision makers. And in conversations with members all across the union, from at the time Washington State to Oregon, the commonality was that in the United States, workers understand contracts. They understand what that means. A lot of people would be like, "Oh, my brother's in a union, my sister's in a union, my dad's in a union," and they understood that they wanted these gains codified, that we hold that ground, and then in the future we could build on that ground. I think it was simply just a decision, a democratic decision about a membership to want to go this direction. And if our members decided that, barring it be, morally wrong, we would likely go in that direction, believe in the preamble of the Constitution of the IWW, as I do, and then move in the direction of doing the will of our membership.
Yeah, I think you when you told us you started with about 4 to 5 people. I think at this first action you went public with 5 shops. I think
4 out of 5.
4, yeah. And this recognition process, is it was it the case for one shop or for several shops, or how did you do that?
Yeah, it was for one shop. So the way that the laws work in the United States, they're lengthy, convoluted intentionally by anti-union labor lawyers that intentionally made labor law in the United States convoluted. We could only go for an election at one shop or all 42, and we did not have the power to win an election in 42 shops with 1,300 employees, but we could win one at one. And so the first shop that went for an election was mine. And I knew that we could win because we had nearly unanimous support for the union, and we ended up winning with 82% of the vote. Had that vote lasted another hour, we would have won by closer to 90%. There was a couple workers who were a little late. One of them who I know was hungover, and were a little late to cast their ballot. The campaign started with about 4 shops going public. My shop went public about a month later. And and then the process for recognition for recognition from the company was one of originally pushing the company through direct action, gaining the company's attention, gaining the attention of the public, and that was incredibly successful in having the company. I mean, the company cares about 2 things: they care about their pride and they care about their revenue, and they do not, and they will not ever admit that they were wrong about anything. So what they will do, however, is that they will change these policies quietly behind the scenes, so that the criticism no longer is true, and they can then later say, well, that what these rabble-rousers are claiming isn't true, which is fine by us, because that's how you get victories and gains. And so what happened during this original period between going public in April of 2016 to when we filed for election in March of 2018 was we did a series of in-shop action from work slowdowns to at least 2 strikes before we filed for a formal election, and marches on the boss, major picketing. Our first picket that we had outside of the convention center location was over 250 people supporting us. Major picket lines, a contingent of 40 supporters from the the Carpenters Union, with flatbed trucks and grills on those trucks making burgers for the passers-by to have so that they wouldn't go inside the shop. Quite an amazing scene, not particularly legal, but we didn't find out about that until later. So through the use of these actions, we've been able to galvanize enough support from the community that we have about 10,000 followers on Facebook. We have hundreds of people that come to our actions when we demand them, and the support, of course, of our membership.
Yeah, and I didn't want to mislead our audience. We talked about so much about this recognition process, but in your model, at least that was my understanding, or when we were talking in 2016, was more this direct action approach to say build the power from the floor up. And I remember a lot of things about. I think there was one fight to say this about this floor mats, and I wasn't I did not work in gastronomy on myself. I just were working in retail in a couple of years ago, so I wasn't aware how important this floor mats was for some of the colleagues. I remember it was what? But this floor mats is so important. It's oh, I don't know. Okay. But yes, I recognize that if you stand on this cold floor all day, that it really gets on your feet and your knees and so on. Perhaps you can tell us a bit more about this direct action approach.
Oh, sure. Direct action, particularly in the direct action that we've taken throughout the course of this campaign has actually changed from 2016 to now. I think in 2016, what we did was a lot smaller scale for practical reasons. We were smaller then, and we had less public awareness of our campaign. And built up and continued to build up over the course of years to larger scale actions. So one of the things that we did in the early times was, if I can remember, was we did we tried to learn incrementally more about how to do everything. So things become easier over time. We tried to learn how to do effective pickets and really get the attention of the local community, that neighborhood, whenever we did them. So we try to do one major picket a month. So get 250 between 100 and 250 of our supporters out on a picket line at a shop to shut a shop down, particularly in peak hours or when there was a major concert. The one that we usually picketed was in this kind of commercial center where there's the basketball team plays a couple blocks ahead and there's like major concerts. So it brings an enormous amount of revenue to the company, except when we have pickets. And so we would try to practice doing those once every month to bring the attention of the local community. We tried to do demonstrations around other issues involving specific issues revolving our workplaces. So one of the ones that catches my attention was we tried to do like publicity-minded issues and member-minded issues around immigrant rights with local churches to bring attention to there's a certain laws in the United States that oblige employers to check the documentation status of immigrants, and to bring attention that the company was voluntarily opting into such a system, because it's a voluntary system that would report such immigrants, bring attention to that through local churches. We did direct action by March on the Boss, where 10 workers would deliver a letter to their local employer saying the demands that they wanted changed, and work slowdowns where workers would, particularly in a rush when there's a lot of people coming in, either on a lunch rush or whatever, to do the job per the letter of their handbooks. So, and as slowly as possible. The point of it, which is to, over the course of an hour, you make 3 burgers, kind of a thing, while there's an enormous line, and the employer can't do anything about it because you're doing it to the letter of their expectations as is written there in their instructions. So we've done a significant amount of those. Over the later years, what we've mostly implemented is smaller pickets, because picketing is actually costs them the most amount of money, though it's not the flashiest. So having a small picket of 10, 15 workers and supporters can do the amount of work of a strike, but it just doesn't get a whole lot of attention. But we do those. And so we've been doing that more and more as the time has gone on, and doing walkouts. So I've personally led workers out on strike 5 different times over the course of this contract fight. The largest was a 4-day strike all across Portland, with, I think it was over 100 workers participating over the course of the strike, and costing the company a significant amount of revenue, and also bringing them back to the table to the negotiations, to where they had previously said they would no longer negotiate any further on wages, to agreeing to further increases, which was the ultimate benefit of that major strike, was to get them to commit to continue to bargain. So we've relied more and more on the power of the strike as time has gone on.
Mm-hmm. I felt like Burgerville seems very, very good in this domination techniques, because I remember you said like they are really good at to say how long does it take to make a burger, and to like how fast it has to be served and so on. And I think there was some other things, and I think some of you in the interview said it's like the most stressful job that they ever had. Perhaps you can tell us a bit about more, because I feel like in some way they're like like from a standpoint of the management, I think it's like a very modern, very good organized management. So, and that in the most cases means like a bad thing for workers. So perhaps you can talk a bit more about that, because especially I felt that has an impact on how to interact also like with your fellow workers, because I remember one of you said that there are no team meetings at all. Like, and every time there's a new rule enforced, everybody has to go into the office like one by one, and so there's no chance at all to get in touch with each other, or like to build more networks amongst each other than the company allows.
Yeah, I can touch on that. So I think that, you know, for example, myself, I worked at a million jobs in my adult life, and I've worked anywhere from warehouse to at a bar to, you know, different occupations, janitorial, et cetera, union organizer. I would say of all the jobs I've ever had, this has probably been the hardest job I've ever been able to have, and it's because everything is regimented. Particularly, everything is regimented. The things that you're supposed to do, the parts of your duties that are not written, are significant. You know, there's this term that I think is often used, sometimes appropriately, sometimes not, of emotional labor, which is, in its most traditional sense, meant that you have to be, you know, smiling all the time and happy and predisposed, regardless of what the situation is, and what that does to you, how that affects you. And the reality is that you have to do that. You have to always, regardless of what's going on in your personal life, regardless of how difficult the job is or how many people are there or how busy it is, you have to be able to do that. And if not, you get reprimanded for it. And that's been incredibly difficult for our members to deal with, is just the soul crushing nature of, you are expected to work at a certain speed. You are not to talk about you know, ancillary issues in the job floor that make it easier if you're able to communicate with your coworkers and, you know, I don't know if I can cuss here, but, you know, shoot the shit and have a good time in a stressful situation. Then it becomes incredibly difficult. You know, the workload becomes that much more of a workload. You don't have that emotional capacity to be able to share with an experience with someone else in a positive way, to make positive a bad situation. So this makes a difficult workplace. It's a very incredibly fast-paced workplace. I think that it's an incredibly fast-paced workplace, and the customer base that comes in, generally speaking, a good percentage of the customer base are terrible and incredibly awful and disrespectful to workers. And, you know, there's a reason why, you know, fast food workers are seen as, you know, kind of the lowest rung on the ladder, why they're seen as disposable. They're not, it's presumed that if you're a fast food worker, and this is true in the United States, I don't know if it's true elsewhere, it's presumed that if you're a fast food worker, you have no aspirations, that you don't, you're a failure of some sort. It can't just be that you're a worker working a job, just like anybody else. And the company takes that to heart. They believe that, they see that, that's how they treat workers, and that's how they treat them in everything that they do, whether it be in regards to union negotiations with their elected representatives, meaning us, or whether it's how they treat them in the workplace when they have a disagreement, or when they have you know, physical issues, what have you. They see them as lesser. They see them as workers that need to be, you know, whipped back into shape, that are naturally lazy, that if you don't tell them what to do and if you don't put them in line, they will, you know, take advantage of the employer. And a lot of the customer base believes the same thing, and a lot of the community believes the same thing, unfortunately. And I think that this also has another effect by which both the employer and the customer base expects even more of that employee, and expects more of the quality of their work and the workload that they're supposed to do. And so an increase of the workload of an employee at Burgerville is just a regular occurrence. If you were a member of SCIU, for example, and the employer wanted to increase your workload by 20% in a certain area, they have to, by the contract, they have to reduce your workload somewhere else by 20% to make up for that. Or if something is missing or something doesn't happen that's part of their workload, they're not castigated for it. It's understood. At Burgerville, that's not the case. Increase of workload of 50% by a worker on any given day is just expected. If a lot of people don't turn up for work, or something happens, or someone calls out sick, or someone gets hurt, everyone else is expected to do that increase of workload no matter what. Yeah. And they have no say in it.
Yeah, I remember that you said there's a lot of talk amongst workers about suicide.
Yeah.
And I always and I felt that also the one claim you had, like, we deserve a voice, is some kind of like in reaction to that. And I imagine that makes it pretty hard to organize with your colleagues, also in the sense of, well, work with us and then things will get better somehow, someday, and so on. How did you deal with that problem? Or like, what is your response to that in sense of how were you able to build some kind of like community and so on?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that because it works both ways. I think both things are possible, equally possible. That those issues of suicide and being despondent and demoralized by the situation, they can be organizing tools. They can also be tools that impede organizing. So throughout the course of this experience, I've had many coworker who's been homeless, who's slept in their car in the parking lot and comes into work the next day and takes a shower at a gym because they don't have the money to afford an apartment. That's not a single occurrence. That's a consistent occurrence. There's consistently always at least one worker who is in a similar situation like that. I had one coworker who, right after they went on strike, was forcibly kicked out of their apartment with their child, was incredibly destitute. A very good union worker, became incredibly destitute. I housed them at my place, my apartment, free, of course, of charge, for a little over a month. And they, I was hanging out with them in their garage while they made the hardest decision, the toughest decision of their entire life, which was to put up their son for adoption because she just could not be able to take care of her child. Give me a second. No worker should be put in that position where they have to choose between the welfare of their child and and not having them. That's not a moral society, one that produces situations like that. And it's not a moral employer that would produce a situation like that. These could be debilitating issues, I think, but they're also organizational tools in a sense, because while these realities of the world can make workers nihilistic and despondent towards organizing and thinking that nothing can be done. It's like the fantasy world of what I think some people think of how organizing happens is that they, I think a lot of people who aren't in this field don't do this. They think that, worker looks at their paycheck and they see the low amount, they look at their coworker and they nod their heads and they say union, and they get to work on that. That never happens. I know, right? Yeah. That doesn't happen. The reality is that workers look at their low paychecks and they just suffer in silence. They go on with that. They are told that that's the way the world works. I don't know how it is in Germany, but you're not told in the United States in any level of schooling how to organize a union, how to do collective action, how to carry out X, Y, and Z. If you're ever told about union organizing at all. And so workers don't have those tools until they learn them. And they mostly learn them not being lectured and told. They learn to do it by having an emotional component with their coworkers that then leads to the belief that you can change things with them, that you care enough for your coworkers, a stranger that you don't know, to be willing to fight for them and know that they would be willing to fight for you. When workers learn solidarity, maybe that sounds trite, but it is the truest way that you can expect organizing to come from such terrible circumstances. And that's why I think we've been able to do incredibly successfully, particularly at 92nd and Powell, but all across the union, is these types of conditions are, the thing about Burgerville and the thing about those examples I gave you are not, they're not special to Burgerville. They're very much standard across the industry. And by teaching workers through action, that things can be won, and the longer they've been at Burgerville, they can see these things changing. They can see themselves, we got them a $1 raise, we got them tips all across the company. After I think it was 3 years of organizing around the idea of tips, we got them those tips, not just at our shops, but for all workers. We've gone on strike 5 different times, and we've been able to stand militantly and strong together. And the actual experience of walking out with your fellow workers, looking at your boss, knowing that corporate is watching, and still do it is an incredibly empowering experience. Doing that 5 times, they're practically militants, that has an effect, and it turns the poverty of the situation into a narrative in their own minds about their own liberation. And I think to see that happen in real time has been one of the most wonderful experiences that I've had. And I think it's the way that you turn the tragedy of capitalism in the workplace into the slow burning story of how you fight against it. And even if you don't get everything you want, it's still, they can still feel that it's worthwhile.
I think that is a good point to talk about also this COVID-19 stuff, which I assume makes a lot of stuff like harder, especially if you don't have any on. Well, I think on paper the US has like the biggest welfare state in the world, but like if you look like for one person at a time, then it's not very much. So and at least like. Yeah, I'm just curious like how does it like how does your union work right now, and are like the shops closed, or like how do you deal with this problem at the moment?
Sure. COVID-19, you know, I don't think it's useful to sugarcoat anything, and to be honest, because to sugarcoat makes certain that other people will not learn from this experience, and to be accurate and in assessing our situation. In a lot of ways, we're doing fine. And in a lot of ways, this has absolutely changed things upside down completely. There's not an aspect of organizing that hasn't fundamentally changed because of this to adapt. And it's been very challenging to do. There's a lot of issues that are rapidly, you know, there's that old Leninist quote that's being tossed around, and particularly right now, which is, you know, there's certain weeks in which years happen. And that's definitely the feeling now. And I think at the start of this COVID-19 era, organizing, employers were kind of thrown in a tailspin, and it allowed for a lot of union organizing to start branching out and start happening. And I think now employers have gotten their footing again and are utilizing this time for their benefit as well, and utilizing the inability of the state to, you know, check in for workers, and to the extent that they ever did. They're utilizing this time. At Burgerville, it's been an enormous sea change. So the company has laid off 42% of its workforce. So nearly half the company's workforce has been laid off. I actually believe it's far higher than that. I think that was just the latest round. So currently at the 42 locations, there are not 1,300, but just several hundred workers currently working. The company had originally done something called furlough, and is now then transitioned to layoff, and given a timeline of the end of July for all workers to return to work or lose their jobs permanently. And so in addition to that, workers are going to lose their health care in the coming days. We knew about this a little earlier in the month when we told this to workers. They will be losing their healthcare. So at a particular time when everyone needs that the most to be able to make sure that they're healthy and safe, a lot of workers will be without any ability to go to the hospital to pay for medications. We have members who are HIV positive, who in the United States, their medication can run up to the hundreds of dollars every month, who will be unable completely to afford any of this. We have workers who have not received a single dollar from unemployment from the state, so have been 3 months with no money. We've been able to assist certain workers here and there by, you know, giving checks to workers and helping out where we can. I've given $100 or so in the last week to a worker who needed assistance for their children. Right now is trying times. We were close on a deal with the company on COVID issues and the return to work, but the company illegally backtracked on bargaining and took back everything that they proposed. And set these deadlines. And so what we're doing now is preparing for a massive escalation along with other labor unions in the IWW, so the Crush Bar Workers Union, hopefully, which is a local gay bar that organized with the IWW, and the Voodoo Donuts Workers Union, which organized back at the beginning of March, and have been organizing for a long time before that, but went public in the beginning of March, to have a collected workplace action so that workers who are unrepresented officially in their workplaces or who are struggling in their first contracts to have a seat at the table on how the reopening of America happens, and make sure that we have a seat at the table and our voices are heard. But it's a struggle. It's a struggle to make sure that our members are safe. We don't want to carry out huge, large-scale actions because we're rational and decent human beings and don't want to put people at risk. And at the same time, don't want to see that territory to the right wing, which is a very frustrating issue to see happen in real time.
So that means like the shops are still open, and
Yes.
how does that work at the moment? So a lot of shops here are, I think this week they started, like at least in Bremen where I live, where you can only, no, you can go in at the moment again, so you can sit down and so on, but I think at last week or the week before it was just like takeout. Like how does it work at the moment?
Right now, it's only drive-through.
Oh, yeah.
So you're not allowed to come inside. People are not allowed to come inside. So it's drive-through, and then delivery apps like Grubhub and DoorDash for takeout. So that's the only way that the companies stayed open. So the company has never given us their financials. We've asked several times. Of course, they don't want to give us their financials because if they did, they would show that there's revenue to fucking give us what we want. But and they don't want to give it. But we suspect the company is doing fine. Labor is incredibly down because there's only so few workers, and those skeleton crews are doing all the work for the company. And the company gets, I think it's over 70% of its revenue from drive-through. This is according to their management team at negotiations. So the loss of the actual dining experience hasn't particularly negatively affected their profit margins because they have a reduced workload, reduced labor force, and are doing most of their business through the drive-through. At the same time, they're using this opportunity to tell us that they are going to permanently shed off hundreds of workers, so that even after this is over, they plan on not rehiring the vast majority of the people that they laid off, who in large part volunteered originally in March to go into layoff or furlough to protect themselves, their coworkers, and their families and their communities. And those same workers who did the right thing are going to be on the chopping block, according to the company, in the coming months, regardless of if they want to come back to work, because the employer wants to shed workers, keep these skeleton crews permanently, and cut their healthcare permanently. It's quite immoral and obviously very normal for any employer.
Yeah. I think I did not follow at that point where you said the company says you can come back to work, but somehow then they say, but this person can and this person can't. I'm not sure if I understood that thing right.
They're telling all workers to come back to work who want to come back to work, but they're only going to accept a certain amount of them. So I think they told us only 4 to 5 workers per shop. So if there's 10 workers or 15 workers that have been laid off at a certain shop, only 4 to 5 will be allowed to return. And the rest
it's like an internal competition where they just say, it's like a lottery where they say, oh, well, we take you and we don't take you.
That's right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that fits a bit into the big picture of this company. If I hear that from you.
At the same day they announced this, it shows a little bit more about the way that companies work. The same day that they announced this to us at the bargaining table, or the same week that they did, they also announced to the public that they were going to be giving free cheeseburgers to medical staff who come into the drive-through, so as to, while they're going to lay off and make homeless potentially hundreds of workers across Oregon and Washington. They want to, sidestep that, so that their idea was, I'm sure, that we were going to make a big issue of that, go out in the street, take some collective action. And so to assuage any media concerns for that, prep some puff pieces in the local press to talk about their free cheeseburger giveaway to all the necessary workers that they care so much about.
Okay, not to be rude, I just wanted to jump in a bit into the website again, and then I just show a bit more around this, how to organize yourself, and then at the end we can jump into Burgerville again.
That's it.
Okay, so then I will share my desktop again. Thank you so much so far. It has been very moving, and also makes me. I think it's. That is my status of feelings all the last couple of months, switching to I don't know what to do, and I'm go into panic, and the other way to say I'm so fucking angry and I want to smash a lot of windows and a lot of people in their faces, especially some bosses, and it's all at the same time. So I guess that's the case for a lot of leftists and not leftists around the world. Okay, let's jump in. So we talked about your model, and then also the results. But perhaps one thing what I remember is there's this campaign Little Big Union, and from what I could see, like on social media, it's kind of like inspired by your campaign. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was involved with the Little Big Union. I actually salted for the Little Big Union.
Ah, okay. But is that also like a local thing?
Yeah, that's
okay.
I mean, that company has Little Big Burger restaurants across the United States, a couple of them, but they only make their money in Portland, Oregon.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, perhaps I would write that down. Perhaps we jump into that later. Okay, so here you can see some more videos, like also the website and so on. And I think some of the information I got from this YouTube video here, which is from September 2018, which is kind of interesting. There's one fellow worker who talks about a bit like the organizational structure and also this strike and so on. And this One Big Burger podcast, but I think you just made 3 episodes, right? Or are you still making that, this One Big Burger
podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we only made 3 episodes, but we have we always intended to make more, so we have all this footage that we haven't done anything with.
Okay, good. Perhaps there will be something in the future. We'll see.
Hopefully.
Okay, so, and as I mentioned before, there are these other campaigns about Starbucks and Jimmy John's. And just to give you a short introduction here, there's also a video from an action. It's from November 2011. And it was mostly locally in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is in the north of the US. And you can jump here, and there's also like a concert they did. And they also tried to do this recognition process in 2011, but they lost the election. I think it was like 2 or 3 votes, I think. It was like very, very close. And I read about it in this book from Mike Puttenhead, and he wrote like a diary about this campaign, and that is kind of interesting. We will see the link here later. And there's also, of course, this association canvas model, and you can jump in here. And what I didn't remember, I didn't tell you before, was I did these videos here, and if you jump in there, you will get an explanation of this model and also some quotes from fellow workers. So you can always, get it directly from the people I spoke to. Then they also had this further consequences, one of which was this tour from Eric and Micah, who not just only came to Germany and Austria, but also to the UK, and I'm not sure where else, but they did like a big tour with this with their experiences, and also that made it possible to bring the organizing training program, which we use in Europe, in North America, in the UK, and at least I did one organizing training in Istanbul, in Turkey. So we kind of share this the same toolbox, and also the kind of direct action stories that Mark told you, like around the world, or at least we try to. And sometimes we also exchange these anecdotes about these small actions and so on. So, and here you can jump into some more material. This is the workplace journal. That is the diary I told you about. And that is it's an audio that's just for the German audience, where the anarcho-syndicalist FAU, they taped it in Berlin. And if you want to jump in, and if you understand German, then you can hear it again. And then there's also this Starbucks Workers Union campaign. Here's some documentation from Diane Krauthammer from 2007. Some interviews. Then I guess you know a bit about Starbucks. Then here's also the history of the Starbucks Workers Union, and also this model of to say the Starbucks Workers Union is like an autonomous part of the IWW, and if you are a member of the SWU, you don't necessarily have to be like a member of the Starbucks Workers Union, which is also kind of a model that at Burgerville and also at Jimmy John's they copied. Perhaps we can jump in at the end to say what does that mean for you in Portland, because at least in New York, the Starbucks Workers Union, their model changed a lot over the time. So it was like from the course of 2004 to 2014, there were a lot of changes about that stuff. And I think there are also some downsides of that to say, how does this local like autonomy of this Burgerville Workers Union or this union models like, I don't know, perhaps in some ways contradicts this idea of industrial organizing and so on. I'm not saying it necessarily has. I was just curious if there's some kind of like a discussion, because I know that from Germany, like we basically, the mainstream unions, we have this kind of model of industrial organizing. So basically that means if I'm in my workplace or at the others, they always say, well, this is this Verdi is like this union, Verdi part of like social services and so on. And in the sense of if we gonna start, or if we talk about copying this model perhaps of, I don't know, Deutsches Rotes, like German Red Cross Union, part of the IWW and so on, that, I don't know, might be helpful, might be not. I'm not quite sure at the moment. Okay, hello, computer. Okay, so you find, again, same stuff, the organizing, the canvas model, and also the results. And what I wanted to show you is video of brand workers. And brand workers is kind of an outcoming of the Starbucks Workers Union, where people did in worker center in New York City, and they employ about, I think, 5 or 6 people at the moment, which who are doing like organizing work or supporting the workers in the local food industry with some staff, but still they use like this kind of direct action model in the IWW. I know that there's also like a lot of talk if that's a good model or not, and what does that mean, and also for the structure in the IWW, but at least there's some, but at least it's like one outcome. And also like biographically, for me, it was an important thing to go like to the US and also learn a bit more about the IWW. So the video is 2 minutes long, and I will just show you this 10th anniversary video.
El sistema alimentario de Nueva York podría ser la base de una economía local y justa. Necesitamos construir desde abajo para que los trabajadores, la mayoría inmigrantes, que producen y distribuyen alimentos en Nueva York, puedan superar el miedo, transformar sus vidas y liderar un movimiento dinámico de justicia obrera.
When I was working under those conditions, I did feel like we were alone, you know? And after we realized that we have rights, it's like discovering a new world. We said, we should change this, we should do something about it. We started to organize.
Ante la creciente inequidad, racismo y deportaciones, Brown Workers está presente para apoyar a más trabajadores de fábricas alimentarias y juntos afrontar a los retos que se avecinan.
Pues de unirme con mis compañeros, nos hizo sentir bien, seguro más ahí en el trabajo. Sí, más cómodo nos hizo sentir, más seguros y tranquilos.
En los últimos 10 años, los miembros de Brown Workers han podido recuperar salarios no pagados y compensación por discriminación.
I think everybody should support workers to where, you know, they can get in contact, with an owner to where they can come to a table and come to an agreement that works for everyone.
Ahora los trabajadores colectivamente están tomando acción directa para ganar su acuerdo que asegura salarios consistentes, condiciones de trabajo seguras y negociación directa con los empleadores.
Cuando ganemos el aumento me beneficiaría mucho a mí, también a mi hija, porque ya no estaría presionada o nerviosa con los gastos que yo tengo que pagar y darle lo mejor que es para ella.
Durante 10 días previos al Día Internacional de los Trabajadores, 1 de mayo, estaremos recaudando $50,000.
Apoya lo más que puedas para darle un mejor futuro a nuestros hijos.
So more workers can get better lives and better working conditions.
So we can win workplace justice agreements with dignified wages and a voice on the job.
Para que los trabajadores podamos seguir teniendo victorias por muchos años más.
Okay, so here we're back again. I will show you just the rest pages here of the Starbucks Workers Union model. You can get here some more information, and then the third chapter of the website is where do I begin if I want to copy some kind of that stuff. And we have here like a short text to talk about if you want to start something at your workplace that in a lot of times people start like with anger to say there was something and I feel unfair treated and so on, and I want to start. And I just want to say, please be aware that if you jump in your anger or like without a filter to act upon your anger, then in a lot of times, like you get in real big trouble if you start that without your coworkers. And so that's why we give you some tools for it, and like we also like try to teach us how to deal with that problem and so on. So here we're talking a bit about what is our strategy, like how do we, if we talk about organizing, what do we mean by that? I will not jump in and at that point. And then here is a link for the organizing training, which I already mentioned. And this organizing training program, yeah, you can click here on the link, and then at least that's for the German language area. You can jump into like organizing training yourself or like become a trainer and so on. Another thing is like learning from experience, and that is at least in the last, I don't know, 10 years for a lot of like active organizers, me included, it was like really important to say that a lot of, like, I don't know, if I give an organizing training or if I come to an organizing training, then the most things I learn is from experiences from, or like anecdotes from other fellow workers, such as, well, we had this problem at my workplace, and then we did a march on the boss, or we did this action, and then at the end we had that success, or we failed. So that also makes sense. So that's why we have a lot of members who write about their struggles. And there are several websites for that, and especially like for the context in Europe, there are several books about like organizing in West London, which is a new book that came out like 2 months ago. There's also one book about the organizing at Deliveroo, is the delivery service, and there are also like Omni websites from several other industries. Here, there's this Canvas model again, and if you want to download it like in some blank page, you can do that here. There's also an introduction video. Then there's this brochure, How to Fire Your Boss, which is basically like a collection of workplace actions. I think, down here it's the link for the English version. We also translated it, and the picture here is from the German version. Then there's also this Solidarity Network brochure, which people in Seattle developed, I don't know, also perhaps 10 years ago. And here you can see the German version, but I think the link is also to the English version. And then that might be more interesting for people in the German language area. So that we wrote down some of the things where we failed and so on, because I think a lot of people in the German language area say, well, we didn't hear anything about the IWW in the last, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And what we wanted to tell is that after we got the organizing training in 2012, we had a lot of like people in my age, like I'm in my early 80s, early 30s, I wanted to say, sorry. And a lot of people like started to organize in small committees, like for example, like at a call center in Rostock, or like in the chemical industry in Hamburg, or like in memorial service in Brandenburg and so on. And we had all these committees like started with like a small group of people, but we lacked the resources of like supportive people, and we lacked also the experiences of how to build like a bigger campaign. And especially there's not much successful experiences in the German language area after, or at least for Germany, like after World War II. There were some to an extent, but the like the mainstream unions or like the social democratic unions are still such a big part, which is in some cases a good thing, but also it leaves it. That means there's not a lot of space like for grassroots unions, or in some places where we try that, we're not as successful as we'd like to be. So, and currently we still have some active campaigns, but most of them are like at a stage where they're not public, or where they are still under the radar, or at some point to say, well, perhaps they will go public and so on. And that's why a lot of people didn't hear so much about us, but that doesn't mean there's nothing going on, but it's still like, or in some point it's more like invisible. So there are a lot of fellow workers who are participating in the women's strike movement and so on. So that is the thing. And in the background you see a photo which is by the Deutsche Bahn, so like this big railway company, where we had one Betriebsrat, which is like this workers' council in Germany, which is one of the like one of the companies from the Deutsche Bahn, where about 600 people are working. I think like the Deutsche Bahn is like this head company, and then there are about 40 to 45 smaller companies, and one of these where we had like Betriebsrat, and then so we had also the right to speak on the behalf on the IWW. So that's where this photo is from, but still that didn't follow like a big campaign and so on at this company, because there's one fellow worker who's retired now, which is good for him, but not that good for some kind of a campaign. So here's some further campaigns if you want to jump into. Here are some also these books that I mentioned, this Lines of Work, which was very inspiring for me, which is based on the experiences on the block recomposition. And some of them, like this recomposition, I think it's also not online anymore. You can look here on Libcom for the archives, and the follow-up project is Organizing Work, and we have like a similar project in the UK, which is New Syndicalist. And here's also this book, Writing for the Liberal, or Class Power and 0 Hours, if you want to jump in. Here's just one page, who are the IWW, and then just the assistance inspiration. And that is a nice photo from the Organizing Conference 2016 in Oakland, California. And here are Jordan and Claire And
hey, Jordan Clare.
From the Burgerville Workers Union. I forgot his name, but he's also from Portland. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's the website. And we still have 5 people who are watching live, and I remind you again, if you wanna give us some questions or so on, then see this link under the video to our pad, and there's a little chat where you can write some questions or remarks perhaps. And if you don't, then we will just talk about the things we'd like to talk about.
Sure.
So perhaps
Mexican and German food, right? So you want to talk about Mexican and German food? Is that it?
Perhaps, yeah. I don't know. I think I started to like Mexican food when I came to the US, because there are not as much Mexicans here as you can imagine. It's like more Turkish people and Italian, which is still good. But
yeah.
Okay.
The German border with Mexico is significant, you know.
Yeah. It is. Well, I was interested, perhaps you could tell us a bit about Burgerville, like what was harder than expected, or perhaps like what was easier than expected. I think that was one of the question I sent you before.
I think that one of the things that was harder than expected was the first major strike that we did, which was back in February of 2018. That was the first time we went on strike for 4 days. Was it? I forget. Maybe it was 3 days. Forget. But that was the first time that we had a larger coordinated action. It was 3 days at the convention center, and then 1 day strikes at 3 other Burgerville shops, and that was an intense amount of work. We had never done something at that scale. We'd walked out once before at the convention center, but something that coordinated and large scale and had the communication with all workers was something that was very difficult. We didn't know how to do that, and I think for us, you know, we met and planned for literally months that previous summer until then on the logistics of how we're going to do that, getting the legal side of it all, and then planning on how there was a lot of things that we didn't know. Originally, we aimed to go on strike for as many as 3 weeks. And then we realized if we did so, we'd be jeopardizing a lot of people's jobs because of the peculiarities of U.S. labor law. So we decided upon 3 days, and there was a lot of mapping and figuring out how things were going to work during that strike. 100% of members from 92nd and Powell, which is my shop, went on strike. And I think that was the beginning in which we were able to, afterwards, much more streamlined process on walkouts, and the 4 strikes that happened afterwards were fairly easy to do. So I think that was an example of something that, you know, workers walking off may sound simple, but in reality, there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of conversations that have to happen in the lead up to it, and a lot of planning and a lot of legal issues because of how stupid labor law is in the United States. So that was, I think, was difficult. I think another thing that was a lot more difficult was the early conversations around how we were going to deal with COVID. I think that we, you know, we're open to the idea. I mean, you know, we're open to the idea that a lot of things were going to change, but since so many things were changing so rapidly, I think everyone significantly underestimated how enormously it would affect all of our organizing, and our response to it was on how to change the ways that we organize was slower and than we would have hoped, and it's still something that we're trying to wrap our heads around about how to do the same level of effectiveness that got us the concessions that we have so far, and how to move that in the future, because I don't think this normality is not going to be coming anytime soon. Yeah.
So that was harder than expected, and what was easier than expected?
The election at 92nd and Powell. I think there was a lot of people in the BBW who, and I'm sure in the rest of the IWW, who thought that, you know, elections are where a lot of IWW campaigns go to die, and where like it can be an incredibly demoralizing experience if you lose, which is absolutely true. I know that firsthand with the Little Big Union. That was The day that we lost was probably one of the top 10 worst days of my entire life. It was incredibly heartbreaking. It was the one time where we were kind of allowed drinks at the union hall. We all brought a bunch of workers and we all just had a very emotional time because a lot of workers had a lot invested in that and had a lot of hopes that they were going to meet their employer at the bargaining table. That, by the way, would be one of the things that ended up being a lot harder than it. It's not BVW related necessarily, but it was that campaign was the thing that was incredibly difficult that we thought was going to be a lot more easier because of the example of the Burgerville Workers Union, but that employer gave no fucks about breaking labor law and firing every organizer and intimidating and using race and sexism and classism in their advantage. You know, one of my favorite things about the Little Big Union campaign was the employer saying, "You're not like those losers in at Burgerville. You're better than them, so you don't need a union."
Oh, come on.
Yeah, I know. But yeah, elections was the election in 92nd and Powell was there was a lot of concerns, a lot of real legitimate concerns, and it was my shop. It was incredibly easy. I could have not been there, and we would have had the same amount of turnout. We won with 82% of the vote. Had the vote been extended just one more hour, we would have gone closer to 90%. And the following election we won with 77%. So that was a lot easier. Most of the time that I spent during that election was talking to press, and it got us the largest amount of public awareness that we've ever had. With the exception of maybe around an immigrant rights issue that we did later on that year that got a lot of press around right-wing press. But that was a wonderful experience because there's very few times in organizing where things are easier than you expected. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was not sure. I think I've got some more questions where I'm not sure like if that's so interesting for the audience, because I felt that we built up this website and we had more this approach to say, hey, if you want to organize yourself, then this website might be a help for you. But it turns out I think I knew that before, but it turns out that there are not a lot of like leftists and not so much colleagues like without prior like experience to jump into this kind of like project. And I think I'm not sure. Well, we could speculate like what are the reasons for that, but still it doesn't. Yeah, I'm not sure how to deal with it. That's why I'm a lot of like this detail behind the scenes stuff to say like how did you deal with like the stuff of what I recognized in my interviews is to say like you all had like a short questionnaire and it was like not even a surprise for me that I said or that I saw that there are a lot of, I think the most of the people had at least like a bachelor's degree and were like white people and like had this kind of, I don't know, like lifestyle or this moment in their life where they could say, well, okay, now I choose like willingly to go into this and that shop, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just means that I just saw I could get into contact like with a specific kind of group. And like for the Starbucks Workers Union, for example, I could say, well, I had this like bunch of people who like fit into this demographic, but still that didn't mean that in the membership or in the active organizers across like 10 years or so on were just like this white students and so on. But and I was wondering like how does that a case for you in the Burgerville Workers Union, perhaps?
Yeah, it's a sure. I mean, let's talk about that. I think that's very true. That there's a certain type of demographic of people who, who come into the IWW and sometimes do organizing and sometimes not. Sometimes they're members in the general sense. I think that what sets us aside is that there was a lot of people who committed with a lot of grit to stick with this campaign for a very long time. I've been in this campaign for 4 years, I left, I briefly was a union organizer for the SCIU, but for the vast majority of it, I was just an average worker. I don't have a college degree. And, before this, I was a janitor. Before that, I worked at a bar. Before that, I worked at a warehouse. I was and I was also a shop steward for two other unions previous, but I wasn't professional. I didn't know how to do this. Even when I worked for brief periods of time for a major union, it wasn't. I had not led a campaign or any of that sort or done that. So, but I think it's absolutely true that the vast majority of people who will come to the IWW are largely academic from an academic sense. College graduates right out of college. A lot of big group of support when we first went public, and for that first year and a half was a lot of Reed college students, a fairly left-wing kind of a campus, who helped out with our campaign, and that's great. That's really good. But the thing is, if you really want to be serious about organizing the working class, you kind of have to forget about all that. You have to be a worker, and you have to really commit yourself to it. I mean, there's this, it's a very simple term by an organizer known as Jane Maccabee in the United States, where she just says, there is just no shortcuts sometimes. There is just, you have to do the work or it just won't get done. And it's, I've had a lot of conversations specifically around this subject, and, trying to synopsize into a single sentence of it is both a blessing and a curse of the IWW that we have such an amount of intelligent, well-educated people who are a part of it, and so few who are willing to organize in it.
Yeah, and I think also to that point, in the German language area, we have about, I don't know, 330 members or so, and in the UK it's about 2,500, I think. And what I still recognize is that, I don't know, the IWW comes out of this, part of the workers' movement, I don't know, this, this organizational structure that we have to say, we are in worldwide, or at least we try to be in worldwide organization, still has an effect also of the demographic, who comes into the IWW. For example, my own story is to say, my stepfather, was from the UK, and that it makes sense of, how do I stand, how do I position myself to the rest of the world, and being between different cultures and so on. And it also makes a lot of connections, how I can relate to you, for example, in the US, or also at least for a lot of active members in the IWW, we still get people that have similar backgrounds to me, to say they grew up with two languages, or I don't know, their parents moved from the US to Germany and so on. So, and that's also some kind of, I don't know, an interesting fact that that still has an effect on this day-to-day practice in the IWW, which I was kind of surprised to hear that when I asked people about that stuff. I'm not sure if that's perhaps the case for in the US too.
I think it is. I think that the union, the IWW in the United States and in Portland is the result of it is who the people in it are, and the people in the IWW in Portland are primarily white, but the people in the Burgerville Workers Union are overwhelmingly, not overwhelmingly, I think it's the last time we did a survey, it was a majority are black and brown. The vast majority of them do not have college degrees. It's more even in terms of gender demographics than you would see in the IW. So in IW general membership branches, or in terms of general membership, skews more male and skews significantly, overwhelmingly more white. But the BVW membership is very, very distinct and different. And I think what I'm interested in when I think about that is just, and the future of the IWW, not just in Portland, but internationally, is the more and more that we reflect the working class in a real sense, and not just people who kind of elect themselves to be in a member of the IWW, but who come to the IWW because they're representing the workplace of it, or because they want their workplace organized. There's going to be some sort of a cultural reckoning over who we are and how we relate to people, And I think that's going to, if we don't do the work to understand how that's going to affect our views of ourselves and the incoming membership and leadership by that point, that there's going to be a significant amount of issues of, because in the same sense that like a lot of people, like I think I told earlier about how a lot of the customer base of Burgerville is very condescending and views workers in a certain way. Just because someone's a college graduate and leftist doesn't mean they don't view workers in a certain way. You know, and even if they have the good intentions, I think a lot of those people view fast food workers and their struggles as kind of in more like charity than solidarity. And I think that as more rank and file people and working class people and Black and brown people and people without college degrees come into the IWW and naturally take in positions of leadership and want to take want to be a new generation of the IWW, you're going to see, I would presume, a lot of condescension, both over and not, and we should recognize that. We should recognize that the differences there are going to be there, and to be able to, you know, at times uncomfortably, people of past generations in the IW who are currently members to stop, give the mic over to those people and listen to those different experiences, because if we don't, I can imagine a lot of problems in our organization happening as a result of that.
I think I agree with you on that. And when I think of that in terms of like an historical thing, perhaps we should just keep in mind, well, we have some people who have like more time and who are like more secure in terms of their day-to-day lives. And if people use that for good, then it is a good thing. But still, like, yeah, we have to talk about like who speaks for whom and who is like, and who should be like in the front line and who don't, and so on. So yeah. But the thing is, we also got the first question from our audience, yay, which is very great. So cool. So I will ask you that question, and then I think we should do like 10 more minutes, and then when it's like 9 o'clock, then we just stop.
Sounds great.
So the question is, how much do you get an hour now? And how much did you get when you started on that job? So, and another one is, which other concrete gains have you won by organizing? So it's like basically 3 things, like how much do you get an hour? How much did you get when you started? And then which other concrete gains have you won by organizing?
Great. I think I get mired so much in thinking about the dreariness and the fight and the struggle that I forget, like, oh, we actually won a lot of shit. So it's good to look back at our victories. Yeah. When I first started at Burgerville, made I think $9.25 an hour, and no benefits and no paid holidays, no nothing. That was it. Currently, let's see, last time. So I'm currently laid off. So I'm starting. But I will be coming back. I mean, come hell or high water, I'm coming back. So I think last time I checked, I'd make $14.25, but I should have made $14.25, and that's just on wages, and there's another $1.50 on top of that on average through tips. So it comes out to a little closer to 16. And I should be making 25 cents more than that, but according to my general manager, when we had an interview to give my raise, I was the only Burgerville employee that he's ever heard of to say that he did not want a raise. And I wrote specifically for the company, the letter that you write about your experience in that interview process, in that employee review process, I said, I don't want a raise until every one of my coworkers has a raise.
Oh.
It was me trying to say a fuck you to the company. But which I then later
sounds
regretted.
Like a good message, yeah.
Yeah, it is, but I regret it because it's money on the table, and I was like, I could have used that. But when and the victories that we got, very significant. I think the vast majority of our victories came after we got recognition. I'm not saying that that's every campaign should go for official recognition, i.e. for an election. I think what works for Portland may not work for Chicago or New York or Berlin. But if it works for your members and your members won, you should go in that direction. So the things that we've won, I believe it was 5 paid holidays, time and a half, or double pay. So on those days, you'll get your hours plus half that, and then your hourly pay plus half that, or double your hourly pay. So that's an incredibly good thing for workers. So on certain days of the year, Burgerville workers can make per hour as much as $25, $28 an hour for their full shift.
Okay.
Another thing that we've won is we won a $1 increase for all hourly workers across the board, whether they're at the union shops or all the other 1,300 employees at the company. So that was a $1 raise for all those workers is more money in people's pockets, more money in the community. It's good for them. We won tips. So before then we could not collect tips like in a tip jar or through signature process. So we couldn't collect those tips. People could take a tip individually, but if there's no thing there for people to put tips in, they just don't come in. And if you're ordering something, if a customer's ordering something by a credit card, there's no like margin where they could put a $2 tip or something on it. So we've been fighting that for years and years, and we did an action where we went to every single Burgerville all across Portland, Washington, and Oregon, all 42. It took many days, and it was an enormous pain in the ass, but it was useful. And over the course of the campaign, we were able to get workers on average about another $1.50 in addition to their $1 raise. And recently, one of the good victories that we've had during this COVID time and part of the negotiations that we had, one of the few things that did not take back during the negotiations for COVID-related issues, we were able to get workers a long-fought issue, which was to get workers free meals on shift and free meals for their families. So workers don't have to pay anything out of their pocket to have food to work their shifts. So that's what we've been able to get, along with a lot of host of other issues, smaller issues through the contract negotiations.
Mm-hmm. We got another question.
No,
so cool.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's getting hot here.
Nice.
Are all organizers who've salted in 2015 still working at Burgerville?
No. No. I will say this: they were there for many years. It's been 4 years since. Oh no, fuck! Has it been 5 years? Damn, it's been 5 years. Wow, it's been it's been 5 years. So no, they've not all been there. So me and one other worker who started that process. Actually, the two people who were in that first meeting, I can name him, Luis Brennan. He works at the airport. We still work there, so we're the two elder statesmen who've been here since the beginning. Other people left in 2017 and 2018, and but since then we have a lot more people. We've been able to thankfully been able to use less the SALT model of people there, and just have rank and filers who take an active role in the union. But we do still have SALTs. That being said, no SALTs is paid or has ever been paid. This is obviously all volunteer. We do this because we believe in this. I would be more than happy to take a position at some point at some larger labor union as a kind of semi-retirement. But I grew up incredibly poor, so money doesn't really mean a damn thing to me. So I'll keep doing this as long as I can.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that's a good sentence to end with.
Cool.
The only thing I could add is in the German language area, currently we are translating your COVID-19 organizing brochure that the general membership branch in Portland did, and we are working on a page on COVID-19 for our fellow workers, and also some help and resources how to organize in times of COVID-19. Not sure if that will be received so well, but we will see. Yeah, and thank you so much. Then I will end the stream. Please stay in line. I will just end the YouTube stream here, and then thank you so much for watching our 5 people, and then recommend it to all your fellow workers, and have a nice evening then.